Obilo is quoted to have said that the mistake of 1914 has now come to the fore. Do not forget, Obilo called for the reversal of the 1914 amalgamation. Awolowo also describes Nigeria as a mere geographical expression. Coming back to the story, why the agitation of the northern legislators was on, the action group of Obafemi Awolowo initiated a tour of northern Nigeria to raise awareness for self-government. It was to be the issue that further inflamed passions, culminating in the Kanu riots of 1953, when persons mostly of southern extraction lost their lives. The riot marked the next level of mistrust and hate that cursed the Nigerian Civil War after Nigeria got her independence in 1960. Obafemi Awolowo and the Action Group. Let's look at the AG. What do you have to say about that party?
Whether we want to admit it or not, the Action Group was perhaps the very first party in Nigeria, or perhaps indeed of Africa, that was established scientifically.
Scientifically? Yes. How?
Starting up the party, they realized they must have a core belief, a core ideology to which they will subscribe. And in a speech of 1951 in Owo, that would be July, Awolowo said it clearly. You cannot have a party if you don't have a core of objectives or goals, ideology to which you are subscribed. When all the members are subscribed to that, it said for the party to survive, they all also must subscribe to the implementation, the mode of the implementation. So it's not just having a goal, it's also agree on the strategy of achieving the goals. And in their first Congress of Action Group, he identified 4 key goals that if you study him all his life until he passed away, these goals kept on reverberating. He said the first is that we needed freedom from British rule. He said it was unethical, it was ungodly, it was wrong for another group of people to seek to put another group in shame. And that it was important for Nigeria to gain freedom from British rule. I'm not therefore surprised. It wasn't surprising that 2 years thereafter, Anthony Nahuru, that in my view had not been given enough credit for his role in this country. He went to prison because he organized a famous lecture against the British rule. We're talking about this monumental motion for independence in 1953, 2 years after we had the Action Group and a year before the Macpherson, the Littleton Constitution. As a matter of fact, it was this agitation for self-government and freedom and the consequent Kano riots of 1953 that you talked about that forced the British to look at the Macpherson Constitution and see how it can be improved upon. That's why I say, who hasn't been given enough credit. I mean, when you talk of television, it was his idea, bought by his premier, though, but it was his idea. If you go
NTA, the NTA was his idea.
Yeah, it was his idea. He visited Britain in 1956 as the Minister for Western Region for Information, Home Affairs and Midwest Affairs, and met Dennis Williams, who was then the editor of West Africa magazine, and talked about the crisis they had on radio because consequent of this crisis, the Secretary of State then declared Awolowo in some horrible terms on NBC. And Awolowo asked for a right of reply and was denied. And so in the 1954 Constitution, they made sure that broadcasting became a concurrent matter. So Anthony now discussed with this Dennis Williams, we want to start a radio. Then Williams said, why don't you start television? It's more monumental than that. And they have just started ITV in 1954, which was regionalized. He said you could talk to one of the regions and contact with it. And he spoke with Red Vision that was in charge of London area. They brought back a report. Awolowo agreed. They took it to the ESCO. It hasn't been given enough. If you go again to 1962, when they were passing all these motions for emergency in the West, and Awolowo said something. He said, we are starting on a journey, the end of which we don't know. That journey which we started in 1962 by suspending the government of the West, imposing a sole administrator, eventually led to Operation Wete, eventually led to the coup, eventually led to the civil war. We've not gotten out of it. He is a monumental person when it comes to philosophizing. Let me come back to what we are saying. But I think that is somebody who ought to be given a little more credit than he had.
When it comes to Inahoro, though, we'll come back to the action group. Should I blame Awolowo for ethnicism? Because Enahoro, after the death of Awolowo, should have been the next person in charge. But he was denied that role because he's not a Yoruba man.
No, it wasn't after the death.
Okay.
You see, when Awolowo was moving to the center, and last week I told you that spiritually he ought not to, because his assignment was meant for Ududua anyway. And the Midwest was seen as interrelated with the Yorubas. And you must believe this. The Akoko Edo and the Akoko people, the Ishan, the Benin, and so on. So they have this relationship. If he was going, Awolowo was going to go to center, it was obvious that his preference was the Inahoro. Certainly not Akintola. But the action group itself had a hybrid. There were the radicals who thought along with Chief Awolowo on democratic socialism or social democracy, whichever one you want to call it. But there were also the businessmen.
And they were powerful.
They were the funders, they were the financiers. Significant among them was Lewane, there was Madamasi, there was Soni Bare, and all of that. They were the ones who had preference, of course, for the more conservative Akintola as his successor. And that was when the seed of division in the action group was sown. And you know that consequent upon that, they went to in 1962, they had the Just Conference, where the youth took over. The radical wing now eventually emerged as superior.
That's when Bola Ige emerged.
Bola Ige and all of them, even the Jakan, the intellectuals. That was when Action Group now accepted democratic socialism. That wasn't what he called it in 1951. What he called it in 1951 was life more abundant. There was some welfareism, we call it progressive welfareism. As at 51, Awolowo was pro-West. But at 62, he was leaning towards the left. He was no longer pro-West, even in his policies. And that's why it was easy for him to champion the crusade against the defense power which we had with Britain.
Yes.
Which got abolished, thanks also to the University of Ibadan students who demonstrated in the premises of the parliament. So the wealthy ones were the ones who, they were more conservative. They were more interested in their wealth, you know. They have followed Chief Awolowo because they were also the chiefs in Ebel-Muditua.
And they were among those who also formed the action
Who
group.
formed the action. They were prominent there. But Awolowo was a thinker. And he had these young ones. As you quoted, you brought Mabogije on last week. For every period of government, they had a paper. And in that conference in 1951, he said, at this conference, we are going to look at these papers. And we are going to agree on this paper. And we are going to agree on the strategy of implementing these papers. So it wasn't just about forming a party. It was about forming a party that was decidedly progressive and that was decidedly democratic. From his point of view, you can have socialism without going the route of Stalin or Marx or Karl Marx. That you can go it through democratic way, and that was how it came about democratic socialism, which became popular these days as social democracy. And the second thing he said that day, he said there must be freedom from ignorance. That you cannot lead ignorant people. Ignorant people cannot develop.
Freedom from ignorance.
Ignorance. That was what he called it. And that was what eventually translated to free education. It was trying to make the people not ignorant. And when you have ignorant people, then of course they are not even aware. A friend of mine says, ignorance is blissful. You are happy when you are ignorant. You are not aware of your rights. You are not even aware that something is bad and that there are alternatives to the poverty that you have around you. And that's what you are doing. You are fighting a war against ignorance. Political ignorance, social ignorance, economic ignorance. And it's not about having a PhD or having a doctorate in philosophy. It is about being knowledgeable, being socially literate. So what you are preaching is what Awolowo was preaching. You cannot make progress if people are ignorant. And that leads me into something. I went to University of Nigeria before the war. And one of the things while exposed to in that university is the fact that even if you are a science student, you have to know about humanities, about history, and all of that. And if you are an art student, you have to know about science. And I remember one thing I learned, and I never forget it, the usefulness of unrequired reading. That's what I have seen this morning. You brought a novel, and from out of it, you brought something that should resonate with everybody. That even when you are in prison, you can be creative, you can be innovative. That's what that book is saying.
Yeah.
It's an unrequired reading for you. Because it's not mass communication. It's not even the engineering you started with. So for anybody to share the gap of ignorance, you have to read widely. Anything you find your hand on, you have to read it. Even when you